For those who are new to the channel, I share videos and tutorials here on YouTube, and you can find free high-resolution photo references on my Patreon site. If you like what I do and you want to support me, you can show your love over at Patreon. Hey guys, I'm Ines Wang, and today we are going to sketch this cockatoo. Again, for the purposes of learning, I thought to let this play out on real time so you guys can really see how I sketch this. If you haven't already and are new to sketching, I would recommend you check out my playlist Intro to Sketching, as I show the tools I used, how I transfer my outlines, and also like my process of how to sketch on my teapot video. I'll put a pop-up link here so it's easier for you to check it out. If you don't have a charcoal pencil, it's fine. Even I myself hardly use it for this piece, as the creature is quite bright and the darkest dark is very minimal, at least in my opinion when I was doing this. However, for the mechanical pencil, I used it a lot to accentuate the details of the feathers. This reference photo was taken by me and I am selling it on Wildlife Reference Photo. I'll put the link down below in the video description. I also post reference photos on my Patreon page monthly, so if you want some free reference photo, you can go check out my Patreon page. I'd also like to thank my patrons for supporting me on Patreon, for helping me make all these tutorials for free. And without further ado, let's get your paper and pencil and let's go. Okay guys, we are going to start sketching this cockatoo, but before we do anything, I want you to take a look at the reference photo and really take this time to observe it, because I think this is a quite interesting subject in the sense that we are working on a white animal. I would like you to figure out what is the game plan here. I mean, look at the texture, you know, the shading. Even though it's a white animal, it still has a lot of shadows and midtones to go through. So I just want you to look at the photo and just feel, what is the darkest part of the bird, where some shadows may lie, so you can accentuate the details of the feathers, and figure out what sort of pencils or eraser are you going to use for this. So take this time, take a look at the bird and see, what do you think you can go with. Now, looking at this, I feel it is pretty obvious. The darkest part of the bird will be the beak and the eyes. So those are the darkest. I will start my charcoal pencil on those areas. For the others, they are not very dark, so I think I'll maybe probably use 8B, the darkest. But also looking at all the details, because they are feathers, the mechanical pencil will work best to give that really thin, controlled straight lines compared to a pencil where the lines can be blunt. So this one we're gonna have more control if we use a mechanical pencil. Other than that, I think we're good to start. Especially if you look at the texture around the beak, you can see that there are plenty of like little small lines which the mechanical pencil will help as well. So now we're going to begin, and as usual, I always like to start with the charcoal pencil first, because it's a soft lead. It's much easier to put graphite on top of it compared to the other way around, because graphite is very glossy. It can be quite slippery for the charcoal to stick on. Now, I am only going to go certain parts of the beak, paying close attention to the darkest part of the beak. And I'm going to put some charcoal around the area as well. Okay. So I'm going to spread the charcoal around. I'm going to soften. And there is a lot of texture or pattern going on at the beak. So I'm just going to go really slow. Only to be sure to make sure that I get the correct parts. Okay. So you can see it slowly taking its form. Okay. For the eyes, according to the reference photo, you can see that it doesn't really have much reflection to it, so I'm going to change that. And I'm going to add my own reflection to it just to give it my personal touch. Now, it's just a reference photo, so you can always change it however you like. Okay, I blew off some of the charcoal dust. I feel like I would like it to be darker, so I'm just gonna add some more charcoal to that area, especially inside the mouth. That is the most shadow, the darkest of the dark. Now for this one, because the Cockatoo is really bright because it's white in color, we won't be using so much of our charcoal. So if you don't have it, if you don't have a charcoal pencil, that's fine as well. So I'm gonna use my mechanical pencil. Just gonna like draw some little feathers, but in forms of lines, and going to kind of sharpen the edges around the beak here. Just gonna draw like a soft line. Oh dear. Oh, my mistake. Wasn't paying close attention to the outline. Sorry. Oh wait, I was right. Sorry about that. And I'm gonna sharpen the edges here on the beak. That's a good time. So the moment you sharpen the edges, it's also a little easier to kind of gauge where everything goes, because sometimes when you blend it, the edges become really blur, and then you just kind of can't really see what is going on, especially when over here the beak area is just very, just gonna have like a lot of texture, a lot of pattern. Okay, the same goes for the eyes. I'm just gonna sharpen it up so I know where it goes. Okay, I'm going to get in 8B and I'm gonna start with the pattern. There, you know what? Sorry, I'm gonna get my Polychromos black and just kind of go around where the charcoal is, just to get like a little bit more control in the dark area. So like I feel like the beak here, I just want a little bit more darkness to it, but I don't want to go over with a charcoal pencil because charcoal I feel is a little bit too loose, and I just personally like a little bit more control on that. I'm gonna start by just taking the blending stump and just kind of blending my way around it. So I don't really want to use graphite to color it, but I do want this area to look a little darker. Okay. Trying to be careful because there are some parts of the beak where it's like there's indents and concave parts that I have to take into consideration. I am just going to draw a whole bunch of lines just to mimic the texture of the cockatoo's beak, but I am not going to go like super into it. Like I'm not going to look at it real close and try to follow it every single line. I'm just like looking at it and like, okay, well, it just honestly just almost looked like a whole bunch of random lines, so that is what I'm going to do actually, just like that. So this white line here, the highlight of the bottom beak, I'm actually just going to reinforce that with a light outline just to give the the highlight area a little bit more contrast, to make it look a little, make that white pop a little. It's like little cracks and little patterns going on. So I'm just kind of thinking of it. I feel like in nature you always see all these patterns present. They kind of look like tree roots or, you know, lightning. I'm just kind of going for that sort of look. Now I'm seeing over here the bottom beak. It looks pretty dark. So yeah, let's go with that. Okay. Okay. So same here. So over here there's a lot of lighter parts. So we're just gonna do the lines, but a little bit broader, just to let a lot of the white part peek through. So I can take my mono 0 and just kind of give it a tiny bit of highlight here. This cracky area. I'm gonna continue on trying to create these lines. And we're gonna try and follow the curve of the beak. This also helps give it a little bit of a three-dimensional look, like following the shape of the beak. So it kind of feels like it is very curvy. If you feel that it is not bright enough, you can always go through it with your kneadable eraser or a normal eraser if you don't have a kneadable one. Okay. I feel the top of the beak should be a little bit lighter. Just a little. I'm gonna go through it with the mechanical pencil, but quite light. As light as I can. I'm gonna do a little bit of pattern as well with the shadow because it looks a little too smooth, too plain. Okay, so now you can see there's a lot of information going through here. A lot of details. Now for the tongue, it is a bit dark, so I'm just going to go in there with a blending stump. I don't want it to be super bright because it's in the shadows, it's in its mouth. Like that. And I'm just gonna get, let's see, polychromos here. I'm just kind of give it like a little dotted effect. Trying to follow closely a little to the reference photo. Gonna sharpen the edges here with the mechanical pencil. And I'm just gonna use a mono eraser just to clean up the edges just a little bit because I can see it looks a little dirty to me. Okay, so I'm just gonna clean it. Alright, that is all for the beak, unless I feel like I'm gonna modify it some more, but other than that I think we're cool. And we are gonna follow the, let's start with the eyes. Gonna use a polychromos and just go over the eye, just kind of blend the charcoal a bit with the polychromos, trying to create that really dark texture look to it. Now the highlight on the below part of the eye, I want it to be a little bit, just a little bit, not too much. Trying to take the sharpest part of my pencil here just to get that accuracy. Alright, I took your blending stuff just like that and go over it with a mechanical pencil, trying to get that. Okay, hang on, let me blow the dust. Okay, here looks a little dirty. I'm just gonna erase this here for a bit. Is my hands clean? Yes, they are. Just want to do all these checks. Okay, so now we're gonna do the sort of the eyelid. Gonna put a little bit more shadow into the eye for the upper lid. Okay. Now for the bottom. For this, we're gonna go with 2B. I'm gonna go with a HB. For areas such as these, pay close attention because, you know, eyelids are a little curvature because they are eyelids when they are a little bit cylindrical. So we're kind of like looking at the reference photo. The top is a little bit dark. The bottom is dark, but because it's away from the light source. The middle will have the most light coming through. So that's what we're aiming for. I'm going to use the HB to get that bottom part of the eye here. Around here as well. Same for down here too. Okay. Alright, The 2B, I'll use my mechanical pencil for the 2B part. Just gonna enforce that top lid here. Alright, and then there is like some texture going on around the eyelids here, so we're gonna use the mechanical pencil to give that really sharp look. And it's kind of like a very wrinkly look to it. So, and don't necessarily use straight lines because it is cylindrical after all, so just kind of use like curved lines instead. It's like a ring, so we're gonna go back. Okay. So we're just gonna work from there. Let's get me some of that HB. A little bit more shadows because all the skin are being folded. It's like a lot of pattern going on here. So you can see the skin here looks a little wrinkly as well. I'm gonna try and mimic that using the mechanical pencil. Just kind of mimic the lines. Now I'm not going super like, I'm not following every single line of the wrinkle. I just feel like, okay, it kind of goes in this direction and in that direction. Alright, I don't want to get too caught up in it. And you can see from the wrinkles of the skin, it slowly starts to merge with the, I was gonna say fur, but feathers, but it's almost the same really. Fur and feathers are more or less the same. Alright, so now that you've done the line for the eyes, now we need to add depth. So we're just gonna go over it. So again, we're gonna go with the HB pencil. And like before, just kind of imagine where the cylinder, the bottom of the cylinder is. And we're just gonna go that with the HB pencil as its shadows. And the top part of the cylinder is also a little bit dark because it's catching some of the shadows from the above skin folding. So even though this bird is white, there is still a lot of work to be done to give it depth, to create that sense of realism here. So now that I think we are done with the eyes for now. We'll have to see the picture as a whole whether we want to continue, working on it. I'm taking my mechanical pencil, just kind of rough it out. make it a little darker, a little more crisp. Okay. So you can see that it's slowly coming together. I always like to work with maybe the eyes. Sometimes I like to work with it the earliest, depending on my mood, because I feel like the eyes take a lot of the attention, and sometimes you don't want the, it's nice to figure out where you want the attention to go, so you can pay less attention to the rest of the painting, because if you put too much details everywhere, it might confuse your viewer's eyes. So usually, the eyes are always the safest way. So when you compose your art, it's always good to figure out where you want it to go, because we as artists, I think we are kind of like directors in our own movie. You have to figure out which part is the important bit and which part are the not so important bit, and you have to steer your viewer to that spot, because sometimes you only get a little bit, only a short time to impress people these days. Now for the shadowy part, now I'm gonna like go underneath the eye, shade it a little, but over here you can see, according to the reference photo, you can see that the feathers are actually moving out. So here's the beak and here's the feather, so the feathers is going out. And here, this part, the underneath part, is a little dark, as it should be. Let me take my 2B. So yeah, we're just going to go with that. Just going around. Now we can take our blending stump as well. Just kind of soften it. Okay. Maybe I'll kind of use the 2B again, just like darken up, add a little bit more layers, and just darken up. Give it also give it a little bit of texture. Okay, I'm gonna go with the mechanical pencil here and just kind of give the feathers a little bit more definition. So we're kind of working our way up. So we are starting with a little bit of shading. So nothing too detailed. So we're just kind of like shading this part here, giving it a little bit of just a little bit of shading. Nothing much really. Okay, so it doesn't really look like much. And then we're just gonna darken the area, because you have to figure out where are the midtones and shadows for this. Yeah, and then when you feel like this area is enough, then you're gonna actually add more details like that. So we're basically building it up. So it's not that difficult in the sense that you just gotta like, you gotta break down the steps, like, because when you look at art or you look at the photo, you're just kind of like looking at it from the finished product, and it's actually quite okay to deal with if you know how to break it down. So even though really it doesn't look like you know you're basically just doing just tiny lines here, already it looks like a lot. So it's just kind of making it look as if we're doing something. So if you pay close attention, I feel like the feathers here are kind of small. But then after that, it starts to get a little longer. So again, I'm just like going over it with my HB, not going too dark. I'm just like, oh, okay, this is kind of like how the feathers will be. I'll use a blending stump, and I quite like the blending stump because you are, in a way, you're also coloring it. You are spreading out where those your strokes were, no matter how light, because your blending stump already has some graphite on it, so it will definitely darken it as well, adding its own color to it. And then you're just like going where you feel it's right, and you're using your mechanical pencil and just creating more details, more depth. So basically we're just gonna keep doing that. So I'm taking my HB, adding some, I don't want to do it too dark. The reason why I picked HB is because over here is kind of like the lightest part of the bird, the head. So it's not much darkness to it. So I'm just going really light, going it over with the HB. Now I'm looking at the reference photo. At this point, it's really hard to tell where the feathers are, mainly because it is very bright. So I'm trying my best to figure it out as I go along, like life. So I'm using my HB, trying to like block in all the feathers, like where I think the feathers are. Trying my best to decipher all the information. And you can see, like, compared to the feathers here, it gets bigger and bigger. We are almost at the crown. Okay. Alright, okay, I think we can start shading these parts here. So now that I can more or less define where everything is, Okay, I'm gonna use the blending stump to color it in. Color it in and make everything shading. I'll try to be light around this area here because that's quite bright, so I'm not gonna do much. Okay, I'm gonna go over it with my mechanical pencil. And the lines, I'm not gonna do much, just a little bit. I feel like this particular line was a little too harsh. I'm just going over it, giving it more defined lines. You can see over here, I'm gonna give it a little bit more fur texture because that's when the fur slowly transition from skin to fur. Okay. So if you want some shadows, we can go over it with a blending stump. I just kind of blend the areas on the bottom part of each feather, following the cylindrical parts. We're looking at the bottom. If you feel like there should be more, you can go over it with a HB pencil. So we're slowly getting there. Okay, we're gonna continue around here because we did give some effect here. Go over it with some mechanical pencil. So you can see once you kind of break it down, when you break the steps down, it really is repetition from here on out. You can see that it doesn't really look like feathers up close, but then from afar it looks a lot like feathers. Okay, over here is where things starts to get a little darker. So I'm going to pay attention to that. And you can start using like little 2B here. So for this part here, it tends to be very bright, and here is where it starts to get darker. Now, here's a little trick. I take the mechanical pencil and I hide the lead. So we're going to use this part here. It's quite sharp. So there are, if you look at the reference photo closely, there are certain like strands of feathers that are just like highlights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create indents in the paper, so I don't have to worry too much about the highlights. So it will peek out once we color it. So we're going to go over it with some HB. And you can slowly grow it, make it a little darker. I'm using 2B now. Now just to create some contrast, I'm going to put in some polychromos just to create more contrast. And we are going to kind of blend it here because it gets pretty smooth around the crown area. So we're just going to create some fur light effect. And add a little pressure to your mechanical pencil to get a darker line. And I'm going to maybe add more contrast using a 2HB pencil and just kind of blend it. Okay. go over with a mechanical pencil again, just pick out. Okay. Going to go through some feathers. Now I'm going to move underneath the eyes here, and since there's a lot of line work, it's like a clash of feathers in this area. I feel here there isn't much. We're gonna go over it with some HB. Because it feels like it should be a little bit darker. So going over with some HB and then, oops. It's my blending stump and just kind of spreading the graphite along. So over here you can see there's more shadow at that area. So we're gonna make sure can add some contrast. Whenever you see contrast, that's like the great, like take advantage of that. It's like really dark here too, so I'm taking a polychromos and just adding that contrast. So like I said, it's at this point is more or less repetition, but mostly repetition and observing. Okay, so going to just use the mechanical pencil, just kind of just show peaks. Just give it an impression of feathers. Apparently there is some more. This keeps kind of going for a while. So same thing, just kind of pour. Just draw some feathery lines. So I'm just kind of drawing where I think the next feather form will be, just by doing lots of observation, looking at the reference photo. Try to follow it like quite closely and understand the shapes involved. And yeah, just basically repeat the same thing again and again. That's all I can actually, share with you. That's what I'm doing, really. Doesn't really sound very helpful when I say it out loud, but that literally is what I'm doing the entire way. So I think the blending helps as well, giving it a little bit of depth in terms of, instead of just sharing the outline, blending kind of gives it a little bit of gradient that helps. So over here is a little lighter, so I'm not gonna do too much. So same thing here. Just gonna do the same thing. And over over here, it kind of gets a little darker. So I'm gonna add some, sorry, some 2B pencil in there. And more blending. And I use HB just to make the transition a little smoother. I think I'll take the HB and just kind of go over some of the feathers just to create that shadow effect. Just because the animal is white doesn't mean there is no shadows and midtones, so we have to take into account of that. So some strokes can be darker than others. It also helps create that sense of realism because not all feathers are equal. Okay, so let's slowly head down. I don't know, I feel like there should be a little bit more darkness to it. I kind of like a little more darker tones to it. So I'm using an 8B right now. Okay. And we'll just keep going on, see how it goes. Okay, I'm gonna take a 2B again. Sorry, HB. And I always sketch out the feathers where I think it'll go. Now, again, I am not following it super closely, like every single feather in its place. But I'm trying to get it more or less. I also work very lightly because I am not too convinced where everything is, so Sorry if I'm being a little quiet. This requires concentration. So yeah, I think I am going to just draw, kind of place down the feathers of the entire bird, and I think we can actually wrap it up quite soon once I mark it all down. Now you can actually skip this whole part in the sense that you can just when you are tracing it out and you transfer it, you can totally be much more precise in your outlines. I tend to go bare minimum on my outlines, and then I'm like, I tend to go bare minimum, and then after that I'll just figure it out later on. But if you don't want to, like, if you really want to be precise, then yeah, I recommend you go really detail on the tracing part. But for me, I quite like doing it a little loose. Oh, right here is where things start to get a little circular. Okay, let's see. Here is a little complicating because now everything is starting to warp. Okay. Alright, so in terms of places that seems to be darker than others is around here. here is very obvious in underneath the beak. It's a little darker. I'm just gonna start here first because I find it easier. I'm gonna start with some shadows. Basically, I'm just starting on areas where I feel a little confident, a little more confident than others. Like I feel I can work around here, so I'm gonna start with that. It's like being in a multiple questions exam, you know, if you are absolutely sure that those three are not the answer, then the last one must be, right? So same thing, I'm just going to, you know, process of elimination. I feel here it's a little easier for me, so I'm going to start here. Leave the difficult one for the end, please. Okay. So this one mostly I'm gonna just use a mechanical pencil, and when I feel that it needs a little more shadow, then I start adding using 2B or HB. I don't want to accidentally spread the graphite around, so I'm just going to take a piece of paper and rest my arms on it. Now I'm just kind of going through what I think is right. So since I kind of more or less started drawing, I already more or less placed where all the feathers are, so I'm just gonna go over them with the mechanical pencil. So I'm gonna go over that. I want to be some shadows here. And going over it with a blending stump. I do like the blending stump. It really softens the edge, giving it like a much fluffier look. Which is what we're going for, especially when it comes to feathers and fur. I'm getting a 8B. That darkness does good things. over here tends to be a little bit darker, but before that I just want to make sure I don't lose my feathers. Going through it with HB. And a blending stump. Okay. Gonna go over it with some more 8B. So I'll probably go over this with darker tones when I'm done, because right now it looks very light, which I want to change that. I want a little bit more contrast. I think that would do great for this piece. Okay, trying to create similar. So now I'm just kind of like going through it. It's getting a little bit more complicated because the feathers are going everywhere now. But just take my trusty mechanical pencil and just feel like the feathers in this part, the down feathers, look like it's kind of going everywhere. And this part here. Here is a little bit easier. This is where all the feathers kind of look like a disc shape. But I do have to go over with the blending stump. I'm sorry, my brain is not working so well. I need to go over the blending stump just to make it look, give it a little softer effect. And I think we're almost done. I just need to shade this area as well as making certain parts darker. And then we are almost done, guys. Okay, yay, we are more or less, well, almost done. I'm gonna go through it with my trusty blending stump. So around here it gets a little dark, so I'm not being shy with the blending stump here. Okay, let's see, polychromos. I am going to continue to use you over here. kind of darken some areas, kind of exaggerate it from the reference photo, which is in a way sometimes you can use your artistic freedom and just kind of exaggerate some stuff from reality. I'm gonna use some polychromos here. So just right now I'm just kind of doing lots and lots of touch-ups. I'm gonna use an 8B. over here is not too much of darkness, so we're just gonna blend the bottom part of the feathers just to create that overlapping effect. Okay, we can go over it with some, I think maybe HB pencil. Okay. Have some darkness. It's going to take advantage of that. It's getting really thin up here, so I'm going to use a mechanical pencil. So now I'm looking at the overall picture, and where I feel requires the most in terms of shadow. I feel that's all I have to offer. Maybe some 2D around here. Yeah, I feel that's all there is. Alright. Yeah, so that's it. If you guys want me to draw and sketch other things, can feel free to leave a comment. And if you manage to stay until this far, I really applaud you guys for going through this torture of really boring video. Yeah, okay, I think that's all for today, I guess. Till the next drawing.